Let's make some spare ribs on the old Country Pecos offset. So I got this pack of spare ribs from Walmart, and I love getting my ribs from Walmart because they're really good practice ribs because they're super cheap. So at Walmart, I usually see two types of ribs. They usually have these Smithy Field ones, and they also have the Tyson full spare ribs. I have not seen the Tyson ribs in months at Walmart, but I actually like those a lot better because every single Smithy Field rib I've gotten, the butcher work is like so terrible. The breastbone is like halfway hanging off, and there's just like cuts on the top of the rib tips, but we're gonna make do. So I'm actually making these ribs for a potluck that I'm having tomorrow. So I'm just gonna smoke them up, give them a taste, and hopefully they're really good because I always like to just impress my friends every time I make barbecue. I always want to get better. Yeah, I just take a lot of pride in my barbecue. So I am trimming these ribs Joe Yim style because that is the person that I learned how to trim ribs from his rib video. So I'll have that linked in the description if you guys want to check that out. But the trim is super easy. We're gonna go ahead and start on the back side, and the first thing I'm gonna do is cut off this breastbone right here. All right, and take off the skirt. Then you can see like there's like this like fat lump right here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of like stab that just so that it kind of renders out as I'm cooking. Yo, these ribs smell so bad. I hope they're not like rotten or something. Next, we're gonna cut off this thin bone right here and then the thin meat right here and just push out this meat so I can kind of see what parts are thin, parts are sticking out. Flip. All right, I'm just basically cutting off any parts that are hanging out at this point. Once I get the shape that I want, there's one more cut that I'm going to do. So this is like the fatty part of the spare rib. It's right underneath that breastbone that I cut off. A lot of times you'll get a patch of meat like this right here. It'll be basically covering this whole part. And we want to take it off because the fat is gonna render and that chunk of meat is just gonna fall off, and then now you're left with rendered fat with no seasoning on it. So we want to have this just to be a nice fat cap. So I'm gonna go ahead and just remove this piece of meat right there. Ta-da! Okay, our ribbies are ready for the seasoning. So I probably already said this like a million times on this channel already, but Meat Church Honey Hog is my favorite rub right now. And because of this, I went ahead and bought myself some honey powder from Amazon. Link in the description if you guys want some too. But I'm gonna go ahead and experiment with this and do a salt, pepper, and honey powder rib. I'm about to put it in a cup or something. All right, put this in my Winnie the Pooh cup. Honey, put the honey powder in the Winnie the Pooh cup. I have no idea how this is gonna turn out. Just how fine the honey powder is and how it's coming out on this rib. Kinda cursed. I think we're good, dudes. And with the ribs trimmed and seasoned, it's time to throw these on the Pecos. So my plan is to cook these ribs all the way through at 300 degrees Fahrenheit. As long as I keep the fire nice and low the whole time and not kind of going wild and spilling into the cook chamber and blasting the ribs with radiant heat, I think I'll easily be able to make these ribs incredible at that 300 degree Fahrenheit mark. Also at 300 degrees, I think it'll help the ribs get a really nice pullback on the bone, which to me just makes the presentation that much better. So I'll let these sit on the cooker for a couple hours and then I will check back in later. So I got the ribs on, and as you can see, the way that I oriented the ribs is that I wanted the bones that aren't on the side where the breastbone was cut off. I have it farther into the cook chamber because this is kind of a hotter area, and in my experience, these ribs usually take a little longer to get tender and get to the point where they're ready to pull. So I want to make sure that they get cooked all the way so that we have a really nice bite on them. Also got our makeshift damper up here on our stack extension. If you haven't seen my old Country Pits mods video, make sure to check that out. I'll have that linked in the description. Okay, so we're about an hour in, and I don't know if you guys can see on the dial, pretty much for this whole cook I've been running at about like 325 to 350, which is a lot hotter than I originally wanted to. I've just been so used to cooking on the 250, I put way too much wood inside of the firebox. Matter of fact, let me just show you what the firebox is looking like. Yeah, but as you can see, flames are nice and chill. So even though we're running hot, we're getting some really nice color on these ribs. You know, we're trying to keep it professional here, running hotter than we wanted to, but that just means we're gonna be finished a little quicker, which is a good thing, so we can enjoy the rest of the Saturday. So I will go ahead and check back in when we are ready to spray or do the next step. So a couple hours into the cook and I went ahead and started spritzing the sides of the ribs. And I'm just doing the sides of the ribs because I notice usually when I do spares, it's those middle ribs that are a little bit more chewier, a little bit undercooked for my taste. So that's why I'm just cooling down the ribs, spritzing them on the side so that the whole thing can finish evenly. I'm not gonna spray this because this is that fat that we were trying to render down, so I do not want to cool that down. And the spritz I'm using for these ribs is a combination of water and dark soy sauce. I use a bunch of different spritz. I have apple cider vinegar, I have plain water, I have water and sugar. Kind of just mix them up and use whatever I like because ultimately they're just there to cool down whatever meat I'm cooking. So originally I thought this was gonna be like a 5 or 6 hour cook, but it's looking like it's gonna be a lot closer to 4. A few hours later and these ribs are ready to wrap. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm not gonna put barbecue sauce and foil, kind of like what I traditionally do and what everybody else does. Instead, I'm gonna take a play that is highly inspired by Mad Scientist Barbecue. I'm gonna get some butcher paper, I'm gonna put some beef tallow on these ribs, and I'm gonna wrap them up to finish. So usually when I'm doing melted fat on the meat, I usually will melt it down in the smoker, but recently, it just makes it a lot easier if I just take the tallow or lard just straight out of the jar and then just pour it directly onto the ribs and kind of just like ladle it like that. Because look, the meat's so hot, it's just gonna melt anyway. So save the cooker space, save the foil pan, and just put it directly on. I've tried beef tallow on ribs on this channel when I did an experiment where I tried out Jeremy Yoder's pork lard rib and then tried it against the Wagyu beef tallow rib and tried it against a traditional rib. And for my personal taste, I really like the beef tallow rib, so that's why I'm doing it again today. And then I'll throw these back on the cooker until they are to the tenderness that I like. So as you can see, got the ribs on, so I'm gonna go ahead and close this up. And at this point in the cook, I'm gonna go ahead and take off this damper cap because I wanna run this fire as clean and hot as possible so that we can get these wrapped ribs finished. So it only took like 30 more minutes on the cooker and the ribs are done. And the way that I could tell that they're done is I just lift them up. Very similar to my last video where I showed you like the advanced like brisket tricks. I just lifted up the ribs inside the package and you just feel for the tenderness, make sure that everything feels broken down, and that's to your preference. So I mean, if you like it super tender, then you know, you just keep going until it has enough bend for you. And if you like them a little tighter, then go ahead and just pull them early. And with that said, it is time to sauce these ribs. So usually I like to cut my barbecue sauce with some apple cider vinegar because I don't like my sauce to be super tacky on the rib. But because I went with the tallow wrap, I'm actually not gonna put these back on the cooker. So I actually don't mind having a thicker barbecue sauce. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this back up and let it rest for like 30 minutes or so. And then we'll go ahead and slice into it. Okay, so this is gonna be the true test in this cook because I am notorious for doing a horrible job at cutting ribs. But this time I'm gonna be using intellect and strategy. I'm gonna go ahead and put this face down in the barbecue sauce. Basically, I'm gonna cut these upside down so that I can actually see the bones where they're going. Oh gosh, I hope I can do this right. Okay. Easy peasy. Oh, no. Oh, this one is like diagonal, right? Oh, dang it. Botch it at the end, but not too bad. Ooh. Guys, I think these ribs may have gone bad. So when I first opened up this pack of ribs this morning, it had such a funky smell to it. Wow, this is a musty rib. Stinky. Jeez. And I just thought, hey, you know, these are Walmart ribs, you know, maybe there's a little muskiness to it, but I'll just pat off the blood and everything will be a-okay. But I kid you not, this is like the funkiest ribs I've ever smelled. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to throw these ribs away. But if you guys enjoyed and learned something from this content, then make sure to watch the next video on your screen where I show you how to make an incredible brisket.